He was nearly 100, alone, and fixing a broken step with trembling hands until Keanu Reeves stopped his car. What began as a simple act of kindness unraveled a hidden war legacy, a lost family, and a truth that would leave even Keanu speechless. But what the veteran revealed next changed everything. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The sky above Los Angeles was a dull slate gray that morning, the kind that made the air feel heavier than usual. Keanu Reeves had planned to take a different route to his meeting, but traffic redirected him down a quieter side street near Koreatown. He didn't think much of it at first, just another city detour. But then, as he passed a crumbling brick apartment complex with faded yellow paint and rusted window bars, something pulled at his attention. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a figure sitting hunched on the front steps. The man looked ancient. Keanu slowed his car and stared for a moment. The figure was lean, wiry, his back curved like a question mark. A wool cap was tugged low over white, patchy hair, and a battered brown jacket hung loosely on his thin frame. His hands, gnarled, swollen at the knuckles, were gripping a cracked hammer, tapping gently at a broken stair as if it might crumble entirely under one wrong strike. Keanu pulled over and stepped out. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle the man. "Hey," Keanu said softly, his voice steady but kind. "Do you need a hand?" The old man looked up. His eyes were clouded with time, but there was a sharpness in them that surprised Keanu. No, I'm all right," he grunted. "Just fixing what the landlord won't." Keanu glanced at the step. It was splintered, the edge warped and dangerous. The man had wedged a small block of wood underneath to keep it level, held together by two mismatched nails. The hammer in his hand looked like it belonged in a museum. So did the wrench tucked into his belt. "I'm Keanu," he offered, crouching to the side. "You live here?" The man nodded. "Clay Winters. Been here 32 years. Don't plan on moving unless it's in a box." Keanu's brow furrowed. "You mind if I sit for a bit?" Clay hesitated, then gestured with a shrug. "Suit yourself." Keanu lowered himself onto the step beside him. The cold from the concrete bit through his jeans. "You always do your own repairs?" "Someone's got to," Clay said, not looking at him. "Landlord won't lift a finger unless the place is on fire, and I don't fancy waiting for that." Keanu offered a small smile. "You always this stubborn?" Clay chuckled once. "Comes with the years. I'm 98. Can't afford to be soft." 98. The number made Keanu pause. He studied the man again. There was a steadiness beneath his frailty. The hands were slow, but they moved with precision. His face was a map of wrinkles, but his voice held something resolve, maybe even defiance. Keanu felt an inexplicable pull in his chest. There was something about Clay that reminded him of his own grandfather, that same refusal to be broken. "Were you in the military?" Keanu asked. Clay nodded once. Quiet. Medic. World War II. Normandy. Then, Bastogne. Keanu swallowed. That's incredible." Clay's eyes flicked to him. It was war. Nothing incredible about it. Keanu let the silence hang between them for a moment. He didn't want to press. Clay's tone made it clear he wasn't interested in glory tales. Still, the weight of those words lingered in the air. Normandy, Bastogne. Those weren't just battles, they were turning points in history. And here was a man who'd lived through them, now left to patch stairs with scrap wood and rusted nails. "You must have seen a lot," Keanu said gently. Clay kept his gaze on the step. "Saw too much. That's the problem." The hammer slipped from his grip for a second, clanging on the concrete. Clay muttered something under his breath and reached down with a grunt to pick it up. His fingers struggled to wrap around the handle. Keanu reached for it. "Let me help." "I said I'm fine," Clay snapped, eyes sharp. Keanu pulled his hand back. "Sorry. Just trying to help." "I've had enough help to last me a lifetime," Clay said. "Government sends checks that barely cover the rent. Neighbors walk past me like I'm invisible." Only time people look twice is if I fall over or stop breathing." Keanu didn't speak. There wasn't much he could say to that. "I still got my hands. Still got my tools. That's enough." Keanu glanced at the building. It looked like it hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint in 2 decades. The rain gutters were clogged. The front door had no handle, just a piece of string looped through the hole. On the window beside them, the glass was cracked in the corner, taped over with layers of plastic wrap. "What about inside?" Keanu asked quietly. "Is your place all right?" Clay gave a dry laugh. "Leaky ceiling. Radiator makes more noise than heat. Bathroom sink only works if I kick the pipe 3 times, but I've lived in worse." Keanu shook his head slowly. "You shouldn't have to." "I don't need pity, Mr. Movie Star," Clay said, a little sharper than before. "Don't think I don't recognize you. My neighbor talks about you like you walk on water." Keanu smiled slightly. "I assure you, I don't." "Well, good. I don't want a savior. Just need that step to stop trying to kill me every morning." There was a stubborn dignity in Clay's voice, and Keanu respected it. He didn't see a helpless old man. He saw a fighter, someone who had survived war, grief, and now time itself. But that didn't mean he deserved to be forgotten. "I'm not offering pity," Keanu said carefully. "I'm offering respect, and maybe a better hammer." That made Clay huff. It was almost a laugh. "You any good with tools?" "I know which side of a screwdriver is which." Clay gave him a look. "That'll do." Keanu watched as Clay slowly stood up, his knees creaking with every inch. The wind picked up, whistling through the broken siding above them. Clay rubbed his lower back and gave the stair a test with his foot. It still wobbled. "Come on," Clay said. "I'll show you the leak." Keanu followed Clay up the stairs, careful to avoid the soft, cracked spots. Inside the building, the air changed. It was thick with dampness, and something like mildew lingered beneath it. The hallway was narrow and dim, lined with faded wallpaper that curled at the edges like paper left in the sun too long. Each step echoed, not from volume, but from the hollowness of the place. Clay's apartment was the last one on the 2nd floor. He fumbled with his keys, all of which were labeled with crumbling bits of tape. When the door creaked open, Keanu wasn't sure what to expect. But what he saw hit him in the chest. It wasn't filthy. It wasn't cluttered. It was bare. The furniture was sparse. One worn recliner, a tiny table with mismatched chairs, a lamp without a shade. On the wall hung 2 faded photos. One showed Clay in uniform, younger, smiling, standing beside 2 other soldiers. The other was of a woman, her eyes soft, her hair pinned up like something out of a black and white film. "That's Margaret," Clay said, seeing where Keanu's eyes landed. "My wife. Lost her in '74. Keanu nodded slowly. "She looks kind." "She was everything," Clay said simply. "Heart attack. One minute we were watching Jeopardy. The next, he didn't finish." Clay motioned toward the kitchen sink. "There's your leak." Water trickled from the ceiling, drip by drip, into a cracked bowl set on the counter. The wallpaper above it was stained brown, and a single light bulb flickered above them, buzzing with age. Keanu stepped closer, gently running his fingers along the damp wall. "How long's this been going on?" "Too long. Landlord says he'll get around to it. He's been getting around to it for 3 years." Keanu turned toward Clay. "This isn't safe." "Neither was the jungle outside Anzio," Clay said with a dry chuckle. "I made it through that. I'll make it through this. But you shouldn't have to." Clay didn't respond right away. He walked over to the table and sat down slowly, letting his weight sink into the seat like he was negotiating a truce with his joints. "People stopped caring a long time ago," he said. "I'm just background noise now. Too old to matter, too poor to notice. They don't see me when I walk down the street. They see a problem they don't want to make eye contact with." Keanu remained standing. "Well, I see you." Clay met his eyes. For a second, something flickered there, doubt, maybe, or memory. "I didn't ask for your help. I know. I won't beg. You don't have to. Clay looked down at his hands, the veins rising like riverbeds beneath thin, fragile skin. Why'd you stop, Keanu? What made you come over? Keanu's voice was quiet. I don't know. Maybe I was supposed to. Clay leaned back in his chair. That's the first thing that's made sense to me in years. Clay sat back in his chair, arms folded across his chest. For a while, the only sound was the drip of water into the bowl on the counter. Then he spoke, voice low, like the memories were trying to escape unnoticed. I wasn't supposed to be in Okinawa, he said. They originally had me slated for hospital duty in Guam, but they reassigned me last minute. Some guy broke his leg falling off a truck. That little twist of fate put me in the thick of him. Keanu listened closely, hands resting on the back of one of the chairs. I was a field medic. No gun. Just gauze, morphine, and prayer. Clay's eyes stared into something far away, a place no one could see but him. We lost good boys. Not just from bullets, disease, exhaustion, shell shock. You patch a man up, and the next day he's gone anyway. Sometimes I think the ones who didn't make it got the easier end. Keanu didn't interrupt. There was something sacred about the space between the words, the weight each sentence carried. One kid, Tommy Harris, 18, never shaved in his life, took a piece of shrapnel through the thigh. I stopped the bleeding, kept him conscious, dragged him a quarter mile under fire, thought I saved him. Next morning, infection got him. I held his hand while he went. He said, "Tell my mama I wasn't scared." I told him I would. Clay looked down at his palms, now weathered and trembling. I never found her. Never kept that promise. Keanu felt something tighten in his throat. You did everything you could. Doesn't feel like enough. Silence again. Then Clay reached over to the side table and pulled open a drawer. He took out what looked like a small metal clamp with a padded grip. You know what this is? He asked. Keanu examined it. Some kind of tool adapter? Made it myself. Back when my fingers started locking up, I couldn't hold a hammer right. So I made a stabilizer. Slips over the back of my hand and holds the handle in place. Makes it easier to swing. Keanu studied the craftsmanship. It was simple, clever, effective. That's incredible. Clay shrugged. Didn't have much choice. Either quit or adapt. Have you made more of these? 2 or 3. Different designs. One for pliers. Another for screwdrivers. Arthritis is a stubborn son of a gun, but it doesn't have to end a man's usefulness. Keanu sat down now. The weight of Clay's words settling in. He wasn't just hearing war stories. He was watching resilience in human form. A man who'd been pushed to the edge by time, by neglect, and still chose to fix what was broken, whether it was wood, metal, or himself. You ever think of sharing these designs? Keanu asked. Clay chuckled. Who'd listen to an old relic like me? Keanu leaned forward. Maybe more people than you think. Clay shifted in his chair, clearly unconvinced. People these days want things fast, flashy. If it doesn't come from a big company with a shiny label, they don't care. Keanu didn't blink. You're wrong. People care. They're just not always shown where to look. Clay gave a dismissive wave of his hand. Maybe, but I'm not some genius. I just made what I needed. Survival, that's all. You learn quick when your options are pain or progress. Keanu stood and walked over to the counter, still holding the tool adapter. He turned it in his hand, studying every curve. The material was salvaged aluminum, shaped with a grinder and reinforced with a wire clamp. It wasn't pretty, but it was elegant in its own way, functional, honest. This could help a lot of people, Clay. Veterans, seniors, even kids with disabilities learning to use tools. You ever think of that? I think about not falling down the stairs, Clay replied. That's about as far ahead as I plan these days. Keanu smiled softly. Maybe it's time you planned a little farther. Clay looked at him with narrowed eyes. You keep talking like you're here for more than a chat. Keanu didn't answer right away. He just held up the adapter. How long did it take to make this? 2 days. Most of it was trial and error. The hard part was fitting it to my hand without crushing circulation. Took 3 tries before I stopped bruising myself. Keanu set the adapter down gently on the table. You ever hear of open source design? People online who share Pactor, blueprints, tools, techniques for free. They help each other, innovate together. I don't even own a computer. I do, Clay chuckled. You plan to upload my rusty scribbles to the internet? If you're willing. Clay didn't answer. He leaned back, rubbed his chin, and stared at the ceiling. The leak still dripped in the background. 1 drop every 3 seconds, steady as a metronome. You think anyone really gives a damn what an old man like me has to offer? He asked. Keanu stepped forward. Yes, I do. Clay's eyes searched his face, trying to find any trace of pity. He found none. I don't want charity, he said again, quieter this time. I'm not offering it, Keanu replied. I'm offering a way to pass on what you know, to make sure what you built doesn't die with you. For a long moment, Clay sat still. Then, finally, he reached across the table, took the adapter in his hand, and looked at it like he was seeing it for the first time. I made 3 versions. The others are in a shoebox under my bed. Keanu smiled. Let's start with those. Clay gave a slow nod. All right, but don't go turning me into some kind of hero. Keanu's voice was gentle. Clay, you already are. Clay rose slowly from his chair, joints popping like creaking floorboards. He shuffled toward his bedroom, disappearing into the dim hallway. Keanu waited, eyes drifting again to the photograph of Margaret on the wall. There was a tenderness in her expression that felt alive, even in the faded colors of time. Moments later, Clay returned holding a battered shoebox. He placed it gently on the table and removed the lid with the care of someone handling old photographs or letters from the front. Inside were 2 more handcrafted adapters, each one slightly different. One had extra padding wrapped in worn cloth. The other was reinforced with what looked like a flattened soup can, riveted into place. Trial and error, Clay said, almost apologetically. Didn't have much to work with, but they do the job. Keanu picked up one of them, marveling at the thoughtful details. You built solutions with scraps. That's not just survival, Clay. That's engineering. I built to stay useful, Clay replied. That's all I've ever done. After the war, nobody wanted medics. They wanted machines. I fixed things, radios, old fridges, whatever people tossed out. Just enough to pay the rent. Keanu looked up. And you never stop. Because the minute you stop fixing things, Clay said, voice firm, you start falling apart. There was silence for a beat. Keanu could feel it now, not just admiration, but responsibility. This wasn't about charity. This was about legacy. Clay had quietly engineered a way through pain, loneliness, and poverty. He had bent steel with swollen hands just to keep going. Do you have notes? Keanu asked. Drawings? Anything? Clay hesitated. Then he reached back into the box and pulled out a small composition notebook, its corners curled, pages yellowing. I wrote some of it down, he said. Measurements, angles, not because I thought anyone would ever see it, just so I wouldn't forget. Keanu flipped through the book. Diagrams, dimensions, material lists, all in neat, slanted handwriting. It wasn't just documentation. It was a blueprint of how one man refused to disappear. Clay watched him closely. You're serious about this? I am. And if I say no? Keanu looked up. I'll still come back. I'll still listen. But this matters, Clay. The older man let out a long breath. His eyes were moist now, but he blinked the tears back before they could fall. No one said that to me in a long time. Keanu reached across the table and gently placed a hand over Clay's. Then, it's long overdue. Clay didn't move for a moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. You know, he said, voice lighter, if I'm gonna be famous, I at least want someone to spell my name right. Keanu smiled. Clayton Winters. Got it. No middle name, just Clay. Just Clay, Keanu repeated, tucking the notebook under his arm. In that moment, something shifted. Not in the room, but in Clay's posture. His eyes, the quiet pride returning to his voice. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was beginning again. The city skyline blinked quietly outside Keanu's window as he stood alone in his kitchen, mug in hand, untouched coffee going cold. The silence in his home, usually a comfort after long days on set or in meetings, felt different tonight, heavy, echoing. He couldn't stop thinking about Clay, the man's stubborn pride, the bruised hands, the handmade tools and diagrams no one had ever seen, and that quiet sentence that lingered in his mind like a whisper. No one said that to me in a long time. Keanu lowered himself into the worn leather armchair in his den, one that used to belong to his father. He reached for a small wooden box on the side table, opened it, and pulled out a photo. It was of his younger self, sitting beside River Phoenix, both of them laughing, arms over each other's shoulders. Behind them was a sunset over some forgotten desert highway. He swallowed hard. River had been gone for decades now, but some losses don't soften with time. They deepen. They etch themselves into you. Keanu leaned back, the weight of memory pressing against his chest. He thought of his mother, of Jennifer, of his stillborn daughter. So many people loved, so many people lost. And in Clay's eyes, he saw all of them. The loneliness, the quiet dignity, the refusal to give up, even when the world had turned its back. He pulled out his phone. It was late, but he didn't care. He dialed a private number one only his inner circle used. After 2 rings, a groggy voice picked up. "Yeah?" came a voice on the other end. It was Jordan, his head of philanthropic development. Young, brilliant, always a little too caffeinated during the day and groggy at night. "Hey," Keanu said. "Sorry for the late call." "No worries," Jordan replied, clearing his throat. "Everything all right?" "I met someone," Keanu said. "A World War II medic, 98 years old, living in a crumbling walk-up." There was a pause. "You want to help him?" "I want to build something with him." The silence on the line stretched longer. Like, build what? Keanu stood and walked slowly through the hallway, the framed photos of his past flickering in the moonlight. Purpose, dignity. Something we should have given these men decades ago. Jordan sighed. "Keanu, we've talked about this. Your foundation's already funding 5 veteran shelters. We're stretched thin. And with someone that old. I mean, he built a tool adapter so he could keep working despite arthritis," Keanu interrupted. "He's not looking for help. He's looking for a reason to wake up tomorrow." There was another pause. Keanu pressed gently. "What if we created something bigger? Not just a home, a platform, a space where veterans like Clay can pass on what they know." Jordan didn't speak right away. Then, "You're not talking about a donation, are you?" "No," Keanu said, his voice steady. "I'm talking about building a movement." Jordan's voice came back over the line, softer now, but cautious. "Okay, let's say we don't just do a one-off project. What are you thinking? Some kind of veterans innovation hub?" Keanu sat back down, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "Exactly, but more than just technology or engineering. A space where older veterans mentor younger ones, a kind of cross-generational incubator, not based on handouts, but earned contribution." "You really think Clay can lead something like that?" Jordan asked gently. "The guy's almost 100. He's lived through war, poverty, and silence," Keanu said. "He doesn't need to stand behind a podium. He just needs to be seen. And if we give him the tools, real tools, he could help shape the future for other forgotten veterans." Jordan exhaled. "All right. I mean, this is new territory. We'll have to vet locations, get architects, talk to city permits. I'll handle the permits," Keanu cut in. "What I need from you is the structure, a blueprint that honors their experience, not just their pain. But we'll need a name." Keanu looked back toward the window, where the first hints of dawn were touching the buildings in gold. "Call it the Foundry." Jordan paused. "The Foundry? Where iron is reforged," Keanu said. "Where strength isn't wasted, it's reshaped." A beat of silence. Then Jordan said, "That's actually really good. I want Clay's apartment inspected immediately," Keanu continued. If it's unsafe, we move him. Quietly, respectfully, no cameras, no headlines. I want him to feel empowered, not exposed. Understood, Jordan replied. You want this fast? I want it right, Keanu said. After hanging up, Keanu remained seated, staring out at the rising Sunday. He hadn't felt this level of creative fire in years. Not from a script, not from a film, not even from one of his motorcycles. This was different, urgent, personal. Later that morning, he called a meeting at his home with 3 of his most trusted advisors: Sophia, his community engagement lead; Thomas, an architect who'd worked on sustainable housing projects; and Elena, a veteran outreach specialist who had once served in Afghanistan. They gathered in his den, coffee in hand, curious but alert. Keanu stood in front of a whiteboard, the kind he rarely used. I need your help, he said plainly. We're building something new, a place where veterans like Clay can not only live, but lead. He told them about the makeshift tools, the custom hand grips, the notebook of ideas. But more than that, he described the man behind them, fiercely independent, proud, and quietly brilliant. Thomas raised an eyebrow. You're talking about building from the ground up? Not entirely, Keanu said. We start with what already exists, abandoned buildings, neglected structures. We restore them, just like Clay restored what others threw away. Sophia spoke next. And what about scale? One man can't lead a movement alone. He won't have to, Keanu replied. But he'll be the cornerstone. Elena leaned forward, her tone thoughtful. If we do this right, it's not just about Clay. There are thousands of vets like him, men and women, who were heroes once and now feel invisible. That's the point, Keanu said. We shine a light on one, and we give voice to many. Thomas scribbled something in his notebook. We'll need engineers. Retired ones, maybe. People who can translate Clay's tool modifications into scalable designs, Sophia added, and storytellers. If Clay's willing, we can document his journey, show the country what real resilience looks like. Keanu shook his head. Only if he wants it. No cameras unless he says yes. This isn't a performance. It's restoration. The team nodded. They knew him well enough to understand what that meant. Later that day, Keanu quietly returned to Clay's neighborhood. He parked a few streets down to avoid drawing attention, dressed in a plain hoodie and jeans. The apartment building looked the same: crumbling bricks, crooked mailbox, silence except for the occasional passing car. Clay was out front again, sitting on the same wooden crate, using a pair of modified pliers to adjust the base of a rusted porch railing. His hands shook slightly, but his focus was unwavering. Keanu approached slowly. Back again? Clay asked, without looking up. Couldn't stop thinking about that wrench of yours, Keanu said, with a smile. And the man behind it. Clay snorted. Still ain't for sale. I'm not here to buy, Keanu said gently. I'm here to learn. Clay paused, squinting at him through the morning Sunday. You're serious? Dead serious. Clay stood slowly, stretching his aching back. Nobody's asked me to teach anything in 60 years. Keanu didn't speak. He just waited. After a moment, Clay motioned to the crooked steps leading to his door. Come inside. Don't mind the mess. Inside, the apartment was exactly what Keanu had imagined. Clean, but old. Water stains crept across the ceiling. The heater made a clicking noise, like it was struggling to stay alive. But on the dining table, there was an unexpected sight. Dozens of hand-drawn sketches, diagrams of tools, notes in careful cursive. Ideas that looked decades ahead of their time. Clay noticed Keanu staring. I used to tinker at the VA workshop before they shut it down. Kept going on my own. Keanu turned slowly. Would you ever want to do more with this? Share it? Clay raised an eyebrow. You mean like, pass it on? Exactly, Keanu said. You have knowledge people need. Not just tools, mindsets, adaptability. Clay's face hardened. I don't do charity. Keanu shook his head. Neither do I. This isn't about saving you. It's about building something with you." Clay looked down at his hand, scarred and calloused, then back at Keanu. "Well," he muttered, "you'd better not waste my time." Keanu smiled. "I wouldn't dare." The spark had been lit, quietly, humbly, and it had started not with a headline, but with a handshake between two men who had both survived more than most would ever know. 2 days later, Keanu returned to Clay's apartment. This time, he carried no groceries, no tools, and no fanfare. Just a plain manila folder in one hand and quiet determination in his eyes. Clay was once again outside, sanding a warped piece of wood on his lap with slow, precise movements. His old jacket hung open over a faded flannel shirt, and a thin line of sawdust clung to his sleeves. "You really don't give up, do you?" Clay muttered as Keanu approached. "Not when it matters," Keanu replied, offering a small nod. Clay eyed the folder with suspicion. "What's that? Another charity brochure?" Keanu sat down on the opposite step, careful not to crowd the man. "It's not charity. It's a proposal," Clay grunted. "Same difference, in my experience." Keanu opened the folder and pulled out a neatly typed document, placing it gently on the step between them. Then he reached in again, this time pulling out a handful of photographs. They weren't pictures of Clay. They were photos of workers' hands swollen, wrists braced, fingers wrapped in bandages. Clay frowned. "What am I looking at?" "Statistics," Keanu said quietly. "Construction workers, veterans doing skilled labor, people working through pain because the tools don't adapt to their bodies." He handed Clay a one-page report. Despite his skepticism, Clay took it and adjusted his glasses. His eyes narrowed as he read the numbers. Over 30% of hand-related workplace injuries were linked to inflexible grips and outdated tools. Many of the victims were older people who kept working out of necessity. Clay looked up. "So what?" "So, your designs aren't just clever," Keanu said. "They're necessary." Clay set the paper down with a shake of his head. "You don't have to do this." "I'm not doing this for you," Keanu said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm doing this with you." Clay didn't respond. His jaw tightened. His eyes drifted to the photographs again. Keanu continued. "That plier grip you made? The one with the modified curve and layered foam? We recreated it in a prototype. Had a few test users try it. Their pain was cut in half." Now Clay looked at him directly. "You built it? With your design, your notes. We didn't change a thing." Clay's mouth twitched, almost like a muscle he hadn't used in years had stirred. "I brought you an offer," Keanu said, sliding the rest of the folder toward him. "A real position, consulting, full credit, fair pay, health benefits. Total control over how much or little you want to do." Clay scoffed. "Sounds like a gift basket wrapped in guilt." "No," Keanu said softly. "It's a legacy, if you want it." Clay opened the folder and flipped through the pages slowly. His fingers traced the outline of his own name at the top of the contract. Clayton Winters, Lead Consultant, Adaptive Tool Innovation. The header read. He paused, lips tightening, as if unsure whether to laugh, cry, or curse. "I'm offering dignity," Keanu said. "Not sympathy." Clay leaned back slowly on the step, the folder still open in his lap. His eyes scanned the contract again, but they weren't really reading. He was elsewhere, caught between past pride and present disbelief. Keanu stayed silent. He knew enough not to push. After a moment, Clay closed the folder and handed it back. "I appreciate it. But no." "No?" Keanu asked, careful to keep his tone neutral. Clay nodded once. "You don't understand. I've lived a long time being overlooked. It teaches you something, how to survive without needing anyone. That's a different kind of strength. It may not look pretty, but it keeps you breathing. I don't want to take that from you." "Good," Clay said, standing slowly, "because I won't let you." He moved toward the door, but Keanu didn't follow. Instead, he pulled something else from his jacket pocket. A small metal prototype, smooth and silver, about the size of a wrench handle. "Clay," he said softly, "this isn't about giving you anything. It's about asking you to give more." That stopped the old man. "You told me once that people stopped asking you to teach." "But you never stopped creating, did you?" Clay didn't turn around. "You've been building solutions in a vacuum, and I've seen them. The glove grip alignment, the adjustable pressure ratchet, tools that adapt to human pain instead of ignoring it." Clay finally turned his head. "Because I had to. No one was going to do it for me." "Exactly," Keanu said. "But what if they could now? With you leading them?" There was a flicker barely visible in Clay's expression. Doubt, hope, fear. It came and went like a breeze. "You think putting my name on a piece of paper makes this real?" Clay asked. Keanu held up the metal prototype. "No, but this does." He extended it forward. Clay approached cautiously, then took it in his hands. His fingers ran across the curve, the pressure-sensitive notches, the soft underlay. It was his design, refined, but unchanged. "You kept the joint spacing," Clay murmured. "Most people would have flattened it out." "We tried that," Keanu said. "It didn't work." Clay let out a slow breath. "I never got patents. Never thought I needed them." "You didn't," Keanu said. "Because no one's taking this from you. Only you can bring it forward." For a long time, there was no sound, just the quiet hum of a distant lawnmower and the occasional rustle of wind through dry leaves. Then Clay set the tool down carefully beside him. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no again either. "You'd let an old man like me run point?" he asked. "Not because of your age," Keanu said. "Because of your mind." Clay lowered himself back onto the step and stared straight ahead. "You're either crazy," he muttered, "or exactly what this world's been missing." Keanu smiled. "Maybe both." They sat side by side for a while, neither man speaking. The sun had dipped just enough to cast long shadows across the cracked sidewalk. Clay reached down and picked up the tool again, holding it as if it were something fragile and sacred. "When I came back from Okinawa," he said at last, "they told us the war was over, but no one tells you how to survive peace." Keanu turned his head slowly toward him. "They gave us medals, shook our hands, but after the parades, the silence set in. I fixed cars, repaired furniture. I told myself that helping things stay useful was enough." He looked down at his trembling fingers. "And then, one day, my hands started fighting back." Keanu waited. "I kept fixing," Clay continued, "because fixing is what I know. But these hands," he raised them slightly, "these hands are running out of time. That's why I never showed anyone what I made. Because what if I passed it on wrong? What if they ruined it?" "They won't," Keanu said. "Not with you guiding them." Clay let out a quiet, tired laugh. "You believe in people more than they believe in themselves." "I have to," Keanu said. "It's the only way anything good ever starts." A silence fell again, but this one felt warmer, like the kind of quiet that comes not from distance, but from understanding. Clay nodded slowly. "All right, I'll try it." Keanu's eyes lit up, not with celebration, but respect. "Not because I need the money," Clay clarified, "and not because I want recognition, but because if there's a chance, just a sliver, that some young man doesn't have to feel what I feel when picking up a hammer, then maybe these old hands still have one more mission in them." "You just gave the project heartbeat," Keanu said. Clay raised an eyebrow. "You have a name for this project yet?" "We're still working on it," Keanu admitted. "Thought you might help us find the right one." Clay leaned back, exhaled, and gazed up at the fading light. "Call it the second tour." Keanu's brow lifted. Clay gave a faint smile. "Because some of us never stopped serving. We just forgot it counted." Keanu nodded slowly. "The second tour," he repeated. "That's perfect." They shook hands. Not a ceremonial handshake. Not one meant for photos or deals, just a steady grip between two men, one with calloused fingers and a century behind him, the other with quiet fire and the power to listen. As Keanu stood to leave, Clay called out softly, "You bring that same folder to anyone else, they'll laugh you out the door." Keanu turned back. "Then I'll bring you with me," Clay grinned. "You better. I've got ideas, and I don't like being late." Keanu laughed. For the first time in years, Clay Winters didn't feel like a relic. He felt like a beginning. The next morning, the city woke with its usual clamor, but Clay's apartment was unusually quiet. He had slept better than usual. Something about purpose settling into his bones had eased the pain in his joints. When a gentle knock echoed through his thin front door, he already knew who it was. Keanu stood there, not with documents this time, but with a rolled-up blueprint under one arm and a calm, steady look in his eyes. "I hope you're not here to offer me a new roof again," Clay muttered, only half joking. Keanu chuckled. "Not just your roof." He stepped inside without ceremony, placed the blueprint on the kitchen table, and unrolled it with care. The page was covered in plans, sketches, notes in the margins. But it wasn't just a design for a single apartment. It was the entire building. Clay stared at it. "What is this?" Keanu pulled out a set of keys and placed them next to the blueprint. "It's yours, or rather, it's ours." Clay didn't move. His eyes scanned the paper slowly, as if it might vanish if he blinked. "You bought the building?" he said, voice barely above a whisper. Keanu nodded. Quietly. "Last week. It was falling apart anyway, and no one else was going to step up." Clay scoffed, still stunned. "You say that like it's just another errand." "It wasn't an errand," Keanu replied. "It was a decision." Clay stared hard at the blueprint again, then back at the actor across the table. "Why me?" Keanu's voice lowered. "Because you still have something to teach. Because when I found you, you weren't just surviving, you were contributing. You weren't waiting to be rescued. You were holding up the walls with your bare hands." Clay's gaze didn't soften, but it deepened. "You think that makes me some kind of symbol?" "No," Keanu said. "I think that makes you a foundation." A long silence stretched between them. Then Clay pushed his chair back, stood up with effort, and walked to the window. He looked down at the street he'd seen every day. For decades, the broken sidewalk, the faded fire hydrant, the rusted mailbox. "You're gonna tear it all down?" "Not tear down. Restore," Keanu answered. "Brick by brick, veteran by veteran, starting with you." Clay turned slowly. "I've lived here 47 years. It leaks in 5 places. One outlet still sparks when I plug in the toaster. The floors bow, the doors don't shut. But this place was mine." "It still is," Keanu said. "I'm not taking it from you. I'm giving it back to you, but better." Clay approached the table again, eyes narrowed. "What's the catch?" "No catch, just one offer." He slid a single-page contract toward him. It wasn't corporate. It wasn't filled with fine print. Just a promise. Clay would stay in his apartment during renovations, and afterward, he'd live rent-free for life. In exchange, he'd serve as design consultant for the building's transformation. Clay read the words slowly, then looked up. "And if I say no, then I'll still fix the place. But it won't be the same without you." Clay's fingers lingered over the edge of the paper. His name was printed neatly at the bottom, beside a blank space waiting for his signature. He didn't move to sign it. Not yet. He rubbed his thumb along a deep groove in the old kitchen table. A scar from years ago when he dropped a cast iron pan during one of the worst winters of his life. That same year, he lost 3 friends from the war, all gone in silence. No medals, no speeches, just fading names and VA paperwork. "You know what happens when you give a man too much hope, Keanu?" Clay finally said. "You make him forget how to live without it." Keanu didn't flinch. "I'm not giving you hope, Clay. I'm giving you a hammer." That made Clay pause. His eyes sharpened. "You want me working? I want you building," Keanu replied. "With your hands, your ideas, your history. This project isn't charity, it's continuity. You'll be shaping something that will last long after both of us are gone." Clay looked around his worn apartment. The leaky radiator, the crooked door frame, the aging photo of a woman he once loved, framed in cracked glass. "And what do I get for giving you my name?" he asked. Keanu reached into the blueprint and pulled out a second page, an elevation plan. At the center of the lobby was a brass plaque. Clayton Winters, Veterans Housing Project. Clay stared at the page. "We don't remember heroes by giving them gold watches," Keanu said. "We remember them by building places where their legacy keeps working." Clay exhaled. Not a sigh of relief. A release of the weight he'd carried silently for too long. He slowly lowered himself into the chair. "Fine," he said, "but on one condition." Keanu leaned in. "I don't just sit back and sip tea while young bucks run power drills around me," Clay said. "If I'm signing this, I'm working, hammer in hand, every day." Keanu smiled. "That's the only way I want it." Clay took the pen slowly. His hand trembled slightly, but not from fear. He signed his name with the same firm pressure he used when scribbling in field journals during Okinawa. And when the last letter curled into place, he set the pen down with the finality of a man reclaiming purpose. Keanu extended his hand. Clay didn't shake it immediately. Instead, he reached into the drawer next to the table and pulled out an old tool belt. Worn, faded, but still sturdy. He slapped it onto the table. "This comes with me." Keanu nodded. "It should be in a museum." Clay grinned. "Too late. It's going to work." Outside, the wind rattled the old window frames, but inside the apartment, something had shifted. Not the furniture, not the walls. Something deeper, something permanent. And in that quiet space, between two generations, a plan was born not just to restore a building, but to rebuild forgotten dignity, brick by brick, lesson by lesson. 2 days later, the renovation trucks rolled in. Clay stood outside with his tool belt slung across his hip, wearing a faded military jacket that had seen more years than most of the workers combined. A younger contractor approached him, clipboard in hand, unsure if the elderly man was a curious neighbor or someone to direct inside. "You here to watch, sir?" the man asked. Clay adjusted his belt and looked the contractor dead in the eye. "No," he said, "I'm here to lead." From that moment on, no one questioned Clay's place on the site. He moved slower than the others, but with precision. He had tricks they didn't. When one of the young crew struggled with insulation around a rusted pipe, Clay pulled a flattened soda can from his pocket and showed how to wrap it as a heat shield. "Army trick," he said. "Kept our field radios dry during storms." Each time he shared one of those tricks, the younger workers leaned in, fascinated. It wasn't just the technique, it was the legacy behind it. Clay wasn't slowing the project down. He was enriching it. By the end of the week, everyone on site was calling him Captain. Keanu visited often, keeping a low profile. He'd walk the grounds in a hoodie and jeans, letting the crew do their work without the distraction of cameras or press. But he always made time to sit with Clay during breaks. One afternoon, they shared a sandwich on a curb behind the building. Clay was wiping grease off his hands with an old rag. "You ever feel out of place?" Clay asked suddenly. "All the time," Keanu answered, without hesitation. Clay nodded, as if he'd expected that. "People look at me and see a ghost, an old man in a world that doesn't need him." Keanu looked out toward the scaffolding, where young men were laughing over a measuring tape dispute. Then he turned back. "Funny," he said. "I see the men holding the blueprint together." Clay looked away, blinking faster than usual. "That sign?" he said, changing the subject. "The one with my name. You really gonna put that up?" Keanu nodded. "In the lobby. First thing people see when they walk in." Clay shook his head in disbelief. "Never thought I'd leave anything behind except a box of rusted screws and bad knees." Keanu rested a hand on Clay's shoulder. "You're leaving behind proof that experience doesn't expire." That night, Clay didn't go home. He stayed late, sitting in the main hallway surrounded by dust and stripped drywall. He looked around the building, this skeleton of a place, and for the first time in years, he didn't see decay. He saw progress, a future. He picked up a hammer, ran his fingers along its worn handle, then tapped it gently against the exposed beam beside him. Not to fix anything, just to hear the sound. A reminder that something was starting again, something that still had his name on it. It was just past 10 in the morning when Clay heard a knock on his door, 3 quick taps, polite but firm. He wasn't expecting anyone, and the renovation crew wasn't due until after lunch. He opened the door slowly and saw 3 young people standing there with messenger bags, laptops, and wide, expectant eyes. "Mr. Winters?" the tallest one asked. "We're the team Keanu mentioned. Industrial design fellows. Mind if we come in?" Clay looked them over, 2 guys in their 20s and a woman with a buzz cut and thick glasses who held a digital tablet already glowing with sketches. They looked too clean for construction, too enthusiastic to be salespeople. He stepped aside. "You're already here. Might as well," Clay muttered. They entered his small apartment, trying not to bump into the clutter of carefully stacked tools and personal effects. One of them accidentally nudged a coffee can full of screws, which spilled slightly onto the floor. "Sorry," the young man said, crouching to gather them up. Clay waved him off. "You spill it, you sort it." The team chuckled nervously and took seats wherever they could find space. One of them pulled out a camera, the lens already clicking open. "We're hoping to document your design methods," said the woman, whose name was Alicia. "We heard about your tool modifications. The handle grips. Keanu told us there's genius in simplicity, and frankly, after what we've seen on the job site, we believe it." Clay shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I didn't do anything special. Just kept breaking things and finding ways to fix them better." "That's what makes it special," Alicia replied. "Could you show us one of the tools you modified?" Clay hesitated. Then, slowly, he reached into a drawer by his kitchen counter and pulled out a battered Phillips head screwdriver. The metal shaft was nicked and scratched, but the handle was something else entirely, wrapped tightly in layers of rubber bands, electrical tape, and a strip of an old bicycle inner tube. It looked crude, but it fit perfectly in Clay's hand. He handed it over with an awkward motion. "It's not pretty." The youngest designer, Jamal, turned it in his hand with reverence. "No, but it's smart." Clay sat forward a bit. "You hold a screwdriver too long. Your knuckles start to scream. Arthritis makes you shift your grip every 5 minutes. I figured if the pressure isn't on one spot, it lasts longer." Alicia's eyes lit up. "Pressure distribution through adaptive grip. That's brilliant. And you did this on your own?" Clay nodded slowly. "Didn't exactly have a research lab. Just had hands that hurt." They began snapping pictures, measuring the tool, taking notes. Clay watched, unsure whether to feel flattered or exposed. This was a private thing, just him, his tools, and the daily fight to keep doing what his body tried to quit. On. But for the first time, someone cared how he fought that fight, and they weren't here to pity him. They were here to learn. Jamal set the screwdriver down gently on the table like it was something sacred. He looked at Clay with admiration that was impossible to fake. "You know how many hours we've spent in labs trying to recreate what you just explained with a few rubber bands and common sense?" Clay gave a short, surprised laugh. "You kids must be getting the wrong kind of schooling then." Alicia leaned forward, her tablet now displaying a digital mock-up of Clay's screwdriver. The layers color-coded, and the angles measured with frightening precision. "What you've done is create a low-cost, pressure-balanced tool grip. Most engineers never think to reverse the problem from the hand backward. You designed for pain relief, not for production scale. That's revolutionary." Clay's cheeks colored slightly. He wasn't used to praise, let alone from professionals half his age and twice as polished. He cleared his throat and motioned to another tool on the shelf. "That wrench over there. I wrapped it in plumber's tape and dipped the handle in rubber coating. Got the idea from an old grip trainer for arthritis. The key isn't softness, it's where the resistance lands." Jamal walked over, picked up the wrench, and examined the uneven coating. "It's intuitive. Ugly, but intuitive." "Like me?" Clay muttered, earning a few laughs. The atmosphere shifted. What began as a cautious visit had turned into an informal masterclass. Clay's living room, cluttered and dimly lit, had become a design lab. The engineers weren't humoring him. They were engaged, curious, energized. They opened a second laptop. Together, they started sketching prototypes based on Clay's feedback. As they designed, Clay explained the difference between holding a tool for 5 minutes versus 5 hours. He told them stories not of war or metals, but of working in garages in winter, fixing his radiator with frozen fingers, figuring out which hand position hurt least and which wrap lasted longest. Pain, he said softly, is a teacher most people ignore, but I've had 98 years of its lectures. That line stuck in the air. Alicia typed it into the corner of her notes without saying a word. They began discussing product ideas, a full line, something affordable, scalable, but rooted in Clay's innovations. Alicia turned her tablet around to show a bold heading across the top, Winter Grip Series. Clay stared at it, his name, in a font big enough to command attention. It didn't feel real. You want to name something after me? You already did, Jamal said. We're just making it official. Clay looked away for a moment, blinking fast. I didn't ask for any of this. We know, Alicia said gently. That's why it matters. He reached for the screwdriver, held it in his hand again, and squeezed the handle. It still hurt, but less. And maybe that's all anyone needed. Not perfection, just something that hurt a little less. Outside the window, the sun hit the cracked glass at just the right angle. And for the first time in years, Clay sat up a little straighter. The next few hours passed in a blur. Clay answered every question they had, sometimes twice, when his hearing didn't catch the first time. But with every explanation, his voice grew steadier. Every time someone took notes on something he said, his hand stopped shaking just a little. Alicia set up a small recording device near the table. Would you mind if we document some of this? Your approach to grip alignment could help veterans returning with hand injuries. Clay hesitated. His instinct was to retreat, to say no. But something in her tone wasn't invasive, it was reverent, like she was asking permission to preserve a piece of history. You can record, he said slowly. Just don't make me sound like a saint. I've yelled at more people than I've helped. Jamal grinned. Even better. Saints don't make good inventors. People who struggle do. Clay chuckled. Then I must be Edison. They filmed him walking the team through his workbench. Most of the tools were ancient, their labels worn off, their handles reshaped over time. Each one had a story, a compromise, a failure turned into a fix. As the camera rolled, Clay explained how he'd first hurt his hand decades ago. Not in the war, but afterward trying to fix a heating pipe in sub-zero temperatures for a neighbor too sick to do it herself. No gloves, no recognition. Just a split palm and a deeper understanding of what made a tool worth using. Sometimes the things that last, he said quietly, aren't made in factories. They're born out of need. The team grew silent. Even Alicia stopped typing. Jamal finally said, "That's going in the brochure." The room lightened again. By the end of the day, Clay's cluttered apartment had transformed into something else, a space where old knowledge met new minds. The engineers packed up, still buzzing with ideas, promising to return with updated prototypes based on everything they'd seen. As they left, one by one, each paused to shake Clay's hand. Not out of politeness, but out of respect, real, earned respect. When the door finally clicked shut behind them, Clay sat back down on his faded recliner. The place felt quiet again, but it wasn't the same kind of quiet. It wasn't hollow. He looked at the screwdriver still resting on the table. Winter Grip. His name, not as a charity badge, not a pity project, a product, a real thing, forged from years of pain and problem solving. And now it had legs. It would outlive him. He leaned back, exhaling deeply. Maybe he wasn't finished after all. Maybe a man didn't need to be young to make something new. Maybe purpose came not from age, but from being seen. And for the first time in a long while, Clay Winters didn't feel invisible. The sun had barely risen when Keanu stepped into the temporary office space set up just 2 blocks from Clay's building. Renovation plans were in full motion. The top floor had been cleared. New wiring was being installed, and Clay, true to his promise, was overseeing the reconstruction like a man half his age. But Keanu's thoughts were somewhere else entirely. The night before, he'd received a text from his longtime assistant, Jordan. It was short and cryptic. "We found something. Can we meet early?" Jordan was already waiting inside, seated at a long folding table littered with project blueprints and laptop chargers. He didn't look up right away. His expression was off serious, conflicted. Keanu closed the door behind him. "What did you find?" Jordan turned his laptop around. The screen showed a grainy photo of a young woman in a graduation gown. Blonde hair, sharp eyes, standing alone. "This is Lily Winters. She's 22, lives in Boston, studying biomedical engineering." Keanu tilted his head. "Winters?" Jordan nodded. "Clay's granddaughter." Keanu's breath caught in his throat. "I thought his son passed away." "He did," Jordan said gently, "in 2005. Drunk driver hit him on the way home from a night shift. The daughter Lily was just 2 years old. She was raised by her mother in Massachusetts. No contact with Clay, none that we could find." Keanu sat down slowly. "So, Clay doesn't know?" "No," Jordan said. "There's more. We dug through some veteran services records and rental history. Clay always listed his emergency contact as Thomas Winters. He did it even last year when he had a medical scare. Either he's in denial, or he's clinging to what he wants to believe." Keanu stared at the image on the screen. Lily looked strong, independent. She didn't look like someone who'd been sheltered or lied to. But the story she'd grown up with, whatever that was, had never included her grandfather. Keanu leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Does Lily know about him?" "No. At least, not officially. No records, no outreach. Her mother remarried, changed last names. It's likely she has no idea who Clay Island." For a moment, the room went silent, the buzz of a distant drill outside the only sound. Keanu knew what this meant. This wasn't just a footnote. This was a living legacy Clay never knew existed. A connection that could change everything or destroy what little stability he'd finally found. He rubbed his hands together. "If we tell him, he could spiral. He's fragile, Jordan. Not physically, but emotionally. He just found purpose again." "And if we don't?" Jordan asked. "What happens when he finds out on his own? Or worse, never finds out at all?" It wasn't a question with a clean answer. Keanu sat back, the weight of it heavy in his chest. He had brought this man out of the shadows, given him a reason to build again. But how do you protect someone from the truth when that truth also holds the only chance for healing? Later that afternoon, Keanu walked the half-demolished hallway of the 3rd floor, sidestepping debris and extension cords. The air was thick with dust and sawdust. He could hear Clay's voice echoing from a nearby unit, laughing with 2 young volunteers as he gave them instructions on how to properly brace a beam. The sight lifted Keanu's heart for a moment. Clay was coming back to life, in front of everyone's eyes. His shoulders stood taller, his hands moved with more certainty, and his voice carried the weight of command, something born from years of knowing how to fix what was broken. But Keanu couldn't shake the conversation from earlier that day. He waited until the crew stepped out for a coffee break, then approached the old man, who was now kneeling near a baseboard, measuring tape in hand. "Need an extra set of eyes?" Keanu asked. Clay looked up and grinned. "Only if they still work better than mine." Keanu chuckled softly, then crouched beside him. For a few moments, they worked in silence, marking spots, checking the angles, passing tools back and forth. Clay finally glanced over, sensing something was off. "You're not usually this quiet. What's chewing at you?" Keanu hesitated. "Just been thinking about family." Clay's expression changed subtly. He looked back at the wall. "That'll do it. You ever think about reconnecting with anyone?" Keanu asked carefully. Clay leaned back, setting down the pencil. "My son used to call on Sundays. We'd talk about baseball, sometimes cars. After his wife left, things got harder for him. Work, life. He was a good man, strong." Keanu's throat tightened. "You said he still calls?" Clay didn't answer right away. Instead, he rubbed his fingers together slowly, the way people do when their mind slips into another room. "I know what the papers say," Clay finally muttered. "But in here," he tapped his chest, "he's still out there. Just got busy. maybe lost, but not gone. Keanu didn't speak. He couldn't. Clay turned to him, sensing something deeper beneath the question. Why are you asking? Keanu could have lied. He could have redirected. But something in Clay's eyes open, tired, and quietly pleading stopped him. I think there's someone you should know about, Keanu said gently. Keanu paused. It's not my place to tell the whole story, not unless you want it. But there may be family. Not Thomas, someone else. A thread you didn't know was still there. Clay's body went still. His hands clenched without moving. Is this about my boy? Keanu placed a hand on the man's shoulder. I want to show you something, he said. Only if you're ready. The weight of that sentence hung between them, like a doorway one Clay could either step through or walk away from forever. And Keanu knew the next words could change everything. That evening, the apartment building quieted. The drills stopped. The hammering faded. The workers had gone home, and golden light filtered in through dusty plastic sheets taped over the windows. Clay sat alone in the unit that would soon become his renovated apartment, the only sounds the creaking of old pipes and the hum of a temporary heater. Keanu returned, this time holding a small folder. He moved slowly, like he was entering a sacred space. Clay didn't speak. He just nodded and gestured for Keanu to sit. Keanu placed the folder on the table between them, but didn't open it. Instead, he spoke first. She's 22. Her name is Lily Winters, your son's daughter. Clay's hands twitched slightly in his lap. I didn't know, Keanu added softly. Until a few days ago, neither did she. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was loaded with the echoes of what-ifs, of time that had gone missing. Clay stared at the folder like it might disappear if he blinked. She's real? Keanu nodded. Born in Boston. Her mother passed when she was young. She was raised by her mom's sister. She's in college now, studying mechanical engineering. A soft breath escaped Clay's lips. It wasn't relief. It was something more fragile. Wonder. I thought my bloodline ended with Thomas. It didn't, Keanu said. It got quieter, but it didn't end. Clay looked down at his hands. They were stained with grease, dotted with age spots, scarred from years of labor. Then he looked at Keanu. Why are you telling me this now? Because I saw what it would cost to stay silent, Keanu replied. I saw you waiting by a phone that doesn't ring. I saw a girl who thinks she's alone in the world, and I thought, maybe the two of you are what each other needs. Clay didn't answer. He opened the folder with trembling fingers. Inside was a single photo Lily standing in front of a robotics lab, smiling shyly, wearing a patch-covered jacket and thick gloves. She looked nothing like Thomas, and yet everything about her screamed bloodline. He traced the edge of the photo with his fingertip. She knows? He asked, barely above a whisper. Keanu shook his head. Not yet. I wanted to speak to you first. Clay set the photo down. His eyes were moist, but he didn't cry. I don't want her to see me like this, he said. She doesn't need to see what's missing, Keanu replied. She'll see what's still there. Clay looked out the window, then back at the photo, then at Keanu. Then let's do it right. I want to meet her, but I want to earn it. And just like that, another doorway opened. This time, Clay didn't hesitate. The next morning, dust motes drifted through the early light in Clay's apartment, settling on boxes he hadn't touched in years. The renovation crews hadn't started on this unit yet, so the room remained untouched, frozen in time. It was quiet, just the low hum of Los Angeles waking up beyond the cracked window. Clay sat in front of an old wooden footlocker, the kind he'd brought back from Okinawa. The paint had faded, and the hinges groaned when he opened it. Inside were tools wrapped in canvas, metals tarnished with time, and below them, bundles of paper tied together with twine, letters. His hands trembled as he lifted the bundle, resting it gently on his lap like something sacred. The top envelope was addressed in familiar handwriting. Clay didn't recognize the return address, but the sender's name was printed in the corner, Thomas Winters. Clay sat still for a long time. Then, slowly, he untied the twine. The paper was yellowing, but the ink hadn't faded. He opened the first letter. "Dad, I don't know if I'll ever send this. I want to, but every time I write, I stop myself. I guess I'm afraid you'll be disappointed. That you'll think I've ruined everything. But I need to say this somewhere, even if it never reaches you." Clay's breath hitched. He leaned closer. "Her name is Lily. She has your eyes." Smart like her mom. She laughs in her sleep. "You'd love her, Dad, but I haven't told you about her. Not because I'm ashamed of her, but because I'm ashamed of me. I don't have it together. I can't keep a job more than 6 months. I sleep in the car some nights. I haven't figured out how to be the man you were. And I guess that makes me afraid of what you'd think." Clay folded the letter halfway through, unable to read more. His hand covered his mouth, and his shoulders curled inward. He stared at the floor, where the edge of his boot tapped nervously against the cracked tile. He whispered, "Oh, Thomas." For years, Clay had wondered, why the silence? Why the distance? Why didn't his son come home, or write, or reach out? He had assumed drugs, or prison, or some unthinkable shame, but the truth was so much softer, so much sadder. Thomas had loved him. He was just too proud, too broken to face him. Clay reached for the second letter, hands still shaking. "She made me pancakes this morning." Even though she burned half of them. She said she's gonna be an engineer, like her grandpa. I didn't have the heart to tell her I never went to college. He laughed quietly through his tears. That was enough for now. He sat there in silence, the letters around him, like a conversation he never knew he'd missed. The room felt heavier now, like the air had thickened around Clay's chest. He set the letters down on the edge of the footlocker and leaned back, his eyes drifting toward the ceiling as memories he'd buried started to surface again. He remembered the last real conversation they had. Thomas had just turned 24. Clay had offered him a job helping out at the local hardware shop he still did repairs for. Thomas refused, said he needed to make his own way, said he didn't want handouts from his old man. That was the last time they spoke without tension. After that, it was quick phone calls, short answers, long silences. And then, eventually, nothing. Clay had always figured Thomas was just angry, maybe embarrassed, maybe tired of never measuring up to the standard his father unknowingly set. But now, reading the words Thomas had written in the quiet of some nameless motel room or parking lot, Clay saw the truth for the first time. His son wasn't running from him. He was running from the shame he thought Clay would see. And all the while, Clay had been sitting in this apartment, waiting, hoping, replaying old moments, like scratched-up film reels, believing maybe he'd failed as a father, maybe he'd been too hard on him, too distant, too military, in the way he loved. Clay stood slowly, as if moving through mud, and picked up another letter. This one was dated 3 years after the first. "Dad, Lily lost her first tooth today. She didn't cry, just looked up at me and said, 'I'm tough like Grandpa.' I don't know how she remembers you. I've barely talked about you, but somehow she does. Sometimes I imagine what life would be like if I just swallowed my pride and brought her to see you. She needs you more than she needs me, I think." Clay swallowed hard. A tear rolled down his cheek, disappearing into the collar of his worn flannel shirt. "I'm not the father I wanted to be, but I'm trying. God knows I'm trying. If I don't make it, and she ever finds you, tell her I loved her every day of her life, and tell her you were the best man I ever knew. I just didn't know how to live up to you." That broke something inside Clay. He dropped the letter and sank to the floor, hands covering his face. His voice cracked through the silence. "My boy thought I was ashamed of him," he whispered, trembling. "But I was always proud." He rocked slowly, knees pulled in close, as the weight of years of unspoken love, of misunderstanding, of absence collapsed over him like a wave. It wasn't just grief anymore. It was guilt and regret. Not just for the time they'd lost, but for the words they never said, for the pride that kept them apart, for the missed birthdays, the unshared breakfasts, the grandchild he didn't know existed. Outside, the renovation team banged hammers and saws against beams and walls, reshaping a building. Inside, a different kind of rebuilding began. A quiet knock came at the door. It creaked open, and Keanu stepped in. He saw the letters scattered on the floor, the look on Clay's face, the shaking in his hands. Without a word, Keanu stepped forward and sat beside him. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was thick with mourning. Then Clay muttered, "He had a daughter." Keanu nodded. Boston General Hospital never slept. Even at midnight, the fluorescent lights hummed above the nurse's station, casting a sterile glow over tired eyes and overworked hands. Lily Thomas tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear as she scribbled final notes on a patient chart. Her second 12-hour shift in a row was almost over, and her feet screamed for relief. She checked the time again. Just past midnight. Only 30 more minutes. That's when her phone buzzed in her scrubs pocket. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something told her to answer. She stepped into the supply closet for a shred of privacy and answered quietly. "Hello? Hi. Is this Lily Thomas?" The voice on the other end was calm, polite, and strangely steady. A man's voice. Speaking. "Who is this?" "My name is Adrian Marks. I work with Keanu Reeves. We know this might sound strange, but we have something important to share with you about your family. Your grandfather." Lily blinked. "I think you have the wrong person. I don't have a grandfather." "We understand this might come as a shock," Adrian continued, his voice measured, respectful. "Your father, Thomas, passed away years ago. But before he died, he wrote several letters. Letters he never sent." Lily's back straightened. "You knew my father?" "I didn't," Adrian admitted. "But I work with someone who's become involved with a man named Clay Thomas. He's your grandfather, Lily. He had no idea you existed until recently, and he's been carrying grief for your father ever since." There was a long silence. Lily's heart began pounding. She leaned back against the metal shelving, the weight of the shift suddenly magnified by a fog of confusion. "This is crazy," she said quietly. "My dad, he never talked about his family. He said they were gone." Adrian's voice softened. "That's part of why we're reaching out. We have the letters. Your father left messages that speak about you, about how much he loved you, about the mistakes he made. He never stopped caring. And your grandfather, he just found them. It's changed everything." Lily didn't respond. She crossed her arms tightly and stared at the floor. Her mind raced. Hospital beeps echoed faintly in the background. This couldn't be real. Who even calls in the middle of the night with something like this? "I don't know what you want from me," she said at last. "Nothing," Adrian replied. "Only that you read the letters. That's all. If you want to walk away after, no one will bother you again." "But we thought you deserved the truth." Lily hesitated. "And Keanu Reeves?" she asked, a skeptical edge in her voice. "Why is he involved?" Adrian let out the slightest chuckle. "I know. It sounds unbelievable. But Mr. Reeves met your grandfather by chance. He's helping build something for veterans like Clay. He's not asking for anything either. He just wants to reconnect two people who never should have been separated in the first place." Lily's throat tightened. She had spent most of her life wondering why her father was so secretive. Why he never wanted to talk about the past. Why he kept every photo hidden, every name quiet, every goodbye final. Now someone was offering pieces of the puzzle. Her voice came out more fragile than she meant it to. "How do I know the letters are real?" Adrian didn't hesitate. "We can send you scans immediately. They're in your father's handwriting. Some pages are smudged, others barely held together after all these years, but they're his. We've already confirmed it with people who knew him. And the way he writes about you. Lily, no one could fake that." She didn't respond right away. Her fingers tightened around her phone. For a moment, her breath caught. "You said he talks about me?" she whispered. Adrian replied gently. "He writes about how proud he was of you. How scared he was to fail you. He wrote about missing your first steps, about the time you scraped your knee and tried not to cry, about how you hummed when you colored. He remembered it all. Lily slowly sank onto a crate in the closet, covering her mouth with her free hand. It had been so long since she let herself think about her father with warmth. Most of her memories were tinged with confusion, even resentment. He had always seemed distracted, distant, like he was carrying something heavier than he could say. "I always thought he was ashamed of me," she said quietly. "No," Adrian said firmly. "He was ashamed of himself, but he never stopped loving you." A pause. Then Lily finally said, "Send the letters." "Of course," Adrian said. "We'll email them now. And if you ever want to talk more, we're here." She ended the call with trembling fingers and opened her hospital email. Within moments, the PDF appeared. She tapped it open. The screen filled with a scan of an old notebook page. The handwriting was uneven, a little rushed, unmistakably her father's. At the top of the first page, the words nearly stopped. Her heart, for Lily. "If she ever finds this, I need her to know the truth." The letters weren't long, but each one was raw, honest. There were 10 in total, dated over a 6-year span. Some were written late at night after she'd fallen asleep. Others were clearly written in moments of guilt, or longing, or loneliness. Each one tore a hole in the wall she'd built inside herself. He wrote about her favorite blanket, her first time swimming, how he sat outside her school during parent-teacher nights, but didn't go in because he was embarrassed about how he looked. He wrote about dreams for her, how he wanted her to be brave and kind, how he always saw her as his hope in the world. By the 5th letter, Lily had tears running down her cheeks. Outside, her shift had ended. The intercom buzzed faintly, calling a nurse to room 311, but Lily couldn't move. She stared at the final letter, dated 2 months before his death. The last sentence was barely legible. "I hope one day she forgives me. I hope she knows I never stopped waiting to be worthy of her love." She stared at the line for a long time. Then, in a broken whisper, she said aloud, "I'll meet him." The jet touched down quietly just after sunset. The air in San Antonio was still warm, with a hint of summer clinging to the sidewalks. Lily stepped out of the sleek black SUV Keanu had arranged, holding a single duffel bag and something wrapped carefully in a scarf. She clutched it like it was sacred. Keanu walked beside her, letting her set the pace. She hadn't spoken much during the flight. The letters had done something to her, unlocked something. But it wasn't joy, not yet. It was something more fragile, hope, cautiously tiptoeing into her chest after years of silence. Inside the building, Clay stood by the window of the newly painted common room. He had dressed carefully, wearing a button-down shirt that hadn't seen sunlight in years, and he'd shaved that morning with trembling hands. He'd paced for an hour before finally standing still, watching the street below like a man waiting for a miracle he still wasn't sure he deserved. "She's here," Adrian whispered, stepping away from the door. Clay's heart kicked in his chest. His hands gripped the edge of the windowsill. For a second, he considered running, just leaving, disappearing into the back stairwell, but his feet didn't move. Then, the door opened, and Lily stepped inside. She looked just like the photographs Thomas had hidden in those letters. Dark brown eyes, that serious brow. She scanned the room nervously, then looked at the man in front of the window. Neither spoke. Lily took a breath and stepped forward. I didn't know what to bring," she said softly, unwrapping the scarf in her arms. Clay squinted. The object was worn, soft, and small. A faded teddy bear with one ear slightly torn, its button eyes dulled with time. "I found this in my dad's things after he passed," Lily said, holding it out. "He never let me touch it. He always kept it on his bookshelf." Clay's breath caught. He took a step closer, his fingers hovering just above the bear like it might vanish. On his 5th birthday, he named it Tucky because he couldn't pronounce turkey. He used to carry it everywhere. Lily smiled faintly, tears forming. "I didn't know that." Clay finally reached out, touching the bear gently before meeting her eyes. "I thought he'd lost it," he said, voice breaking. "All these years, I thought maybe he threw it away. But he didn't. He kept it. Even when he was gone from me, he kept it." Lily nodded slowly. He never stopped loving you. He just didn't know how to come back. Clay's hands shook as he sat down, overwhelmed. Neither did I. Lily sat beside him, placing the bear between them. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. They sat in silence for a long moment, bound by something invisible and real grief, memory, and the fragile thread of second chances. Keanu quietly stepped out of the room and closed the door behind him. Inside, Clay and Lily remained seated, the silence between them slowly giving way to words. Not many, at first just ripples. A name, a date, a small smile when a memory matched on both sides. But as the minutes passed, the words grew fuller, steadier. Clay leaned back and rested his palms on his thighs. "I don't even know where to begin," he said quietly. "There's so much I missed, and I've been angry for so long. At Thomas, at myself, at the years. I think I forgot how to speak without bitterness." Lily tilted her head, considering him. "I was angry too," she admitted. "When I was little, I used to ask why we never visited family. He'd change the subject or say we didn't have any. But now, I know he was just scared." Clay looked at her, the corners of his mouth quivering. "Scared of what?" "Of disappointing you," she said. "Of not measuring up. He worked a lot of night jobs, always came home exhausted, but never let me see him cry. Until once, when he thought I was asleep, I heard him. He said, I should have called him. I should have gone back." "He meant you." Clay's throat tightened. He turned toward the window, blinking fast. "He didn't know. I wasn't ashamed of him. I was proud. He was trying. He didn't fail." Lily opened her bag again and pulled out a weathered photograph. She handed it to Clay. It was Thomas, maybe in his early 20s, holding a baby wrapped in a hospital blanket. Lily. His eyes were tired, but glowing. "He told me once," Lily said, "that in that moment, holding me, he understood why you loved him the way you did." "Why didn't he ever send these letters?" he asked, his voice low, almost breaking. "I don't know," Lily whispered. "Maybe he was waiting until he had something more to show for his life. Maybe he was afraid you'd be disappointed." Clay shook his head, almost angry now, but not at her. "That boy didn't need to prove anything. I would have given anything just to hear his voice one more time. He didn't need a house or a job title. He was enough." There was a long silence after that. Then Lily looked at him again, this time softer. "He used to say, 'I got my stubbornness from you.'" Clay let out a soft, ragged chuckle. "I believe it." She looked around the room. "This place, it's nice." Clay nodded. "Keanu bought the building. Wanted to turn it into housing for veterans. He's letting me help with the renovations." "Of course he is," Lily said with a smile. "He doesn't seem like the type to just throw money and walk away." "He's not." Clay paused. "He's the reason we're even sitting here right now." Lily leaned back, folding her arms. "So what now, Grandpa?" The word hit him like a bolt. His lips parted slightly, stunned. "You don't have to call me that," he said quickly. "I know it's sudden, and I haven't earned." "I want to," Lily said, cutting him off. "I wasn't sure until today, but now I do." Clay smiled slowly, tears forming again. Then he laughed through them. "I never thought I'd hear that word again." Lily's flight back to Boston had been scheduled for 2 days after the meeting, but something in her heart refused to let go. She extended her stay first by a week, then indefinitely using her remaining time off from nursing school. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was connection. For the first time, she had family, living, breathing family, and it felt like something fragile that deserved more time, more effort. Clay didn't push. He simply set a second coffee mug on the table every morning and pretended not to smile when she took it. The small routines built quickly. She'd help him sweep the sawdust from the hallway where renovations continued. He'd cook breakfast while she read out updates from her phone. The air between them, once filled with hesitation, had grown easy. But it was Keanu who gently suggested something more. "You've got training in patient care," he said one afternoon as they walked through the partly finished basement of the design center. And you understand how small design flaws affect people more than anyone else. What if you brought that to the table? Lily raised an eyebrow. At the tool lab? Keanu nodded. We're not just working on winter grip screwdrivers anymore. Some of the younger engineers are exploring assistive devices, canes, pill bottle openers, even better grips for medical utensils. They need someone who knows what patients struggle with. You've seen it firsthand. Clay, standing a few feet away, quietly watched his granddaughter's reaction. She didn't answer right away, but her gaze drifted to one of the prototype carts, pushed against the wall a tray of objects designed for veterans with limited mobility. She stepped toward it and picked up a rough 3D printed bottle cap with a wide, textured grip. "This is better than what we use in the hospital," she said softly. "Then help us make it even better," Keanu replied. By the next morning, Lily had a visitor's badge around her neck and was seated beside Clay in the workshop, reviewing a tablet that displayed rotating 3D models of various tool handles. Two engineers in their mid-20s watched her with eager eyes as she pointed to the subtle curvature on a bottle opener's edge. "That's too sharp for someone with arthritis," she explained. "You need pressure without pain. Try adding a rubberized overlay right here. And this angle, it's better if it follows the natural arc of a thumb in a weak grip." Clay leaned closer, clearly proud. "That's my girl," he murmured. Later that afternoon, as the engineers incorporated her suggestions into the design software, Clay showed her the original winter grip prototype, the one wrapped in rubber bands, worn smooth by time. "I didn't even know what I was doing when I made this," he admitted. "Just wanted to stop my wrist from hurting." "Funny how that ended up meaning something." "It meant everything," Lily replied. "It's what brought us here." Clay's eyes softened as he looked at her. "You know, I used to think my time was done, that I had nothing left to offer. But working with you, I feel like I'm building something again. Not just tools, a future." She reached over and squeezed his hand. "You're not just building, you're teaching." By the end of the week, Lily was more than just an observer. She had her own desk at the design facility and was contributing sketches and notes into the team's shared digital workspace. The other engineers started calling her Nurse Lily, half in jest, but always with admiration. They'd ask about hand tremors, joint stiffness, and fatigue levels, and she would give clear, practical answers drawn from real-life patients she'd worked with. She explained how one of her elderly patients once spilled all her pills because the lid snapped shut too tightly. That story led to a re-engineered, pressure-sensitive closure that opened with a single touch. Another time, she described how a man with Parkinson's had trouble holding his fork steady without pain. That sparked an idea for an angled, vibration-dampening utensil. Day by day, the winter grip line expanded from tools to dignified medical support. And at the center of it all was Clay, now re-energized like a man 20 years younger. He moved through the lab with a steady gait, a pencil tucked behind his ear, and a folded tape measure clipped to his belt. The engineers deferred to him on structure, torque mechanics, and stability. They watched him closely when he worked, studying the way his fingers held certain tools and how he instinctively adjusted for grip. But more than that, they respected the quiet way he taught. He didn't lecture. He asked questions. "What do you think happens if this handle is wet?" he'd say, holding up a prototype. "What's the failure point if a nurse uses this on a double shift?" And when no one had the answer, he'd look at Lily. She'd smile and respond with a case study from memory. The two of them became a kind of team function and compassion, blended into one voice. One afternoon, Keanu arrived to check on progress. He found Clay and Lily at a side table, surrounded by foam cutouts and early prototypes. Clay was sketching a cane handle shaped like a bird's wing. "It's beautiful," Keanu said quietly, approaching the table. Clay looked up, slightly embarrassed. "She says patients grip better when they feel like it's something graceful, not just medical." Lily nodded. "We're not just designing tools. We're giving people back a sense of dignity." Keanu didn't speak right away. He just studied them both. The way Clay's hands moved with certainty now, the way Lily leaned in with focus and kindness, it was more than invention. It was healing. He stepped back, giving them space, and turned to one of the engineers nearby. "Don't forget this moment," Keanu whispered. "This is How you build legacy. That evening, back at Clay's apartment, Lily looked over at her grandfather as they sat in silence, eating simple tomato soup with crackers. The light from the kitchen window cast long shadows across the table. "I think I want to do this for real," she said. Clay looked up, his spoon halfway to his mouth. "Stay here?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Maybe finish nursing school from here. Maybe keep helping with winter grip. I feel like this matters. Like I matter." Clay reached across the table and touched her hand gently. "You do matter, Lily. And you've given this old man a second chance. That's more than I ever dreamed of." The morning started like any other. Clay had his usual cup of black coffee, turned on the radio to a station that still played Glenn Miller, and stepped out onto his porch with a pad of paper and a pencil in hand. He liked to sketch there. Lately, he'd been toying with a new concept, something between a walker and a stabilizer that didn't look medical at all. He wanted people to feel strong, not sick, when they used it. But just as he lowered himself into his old lawn chair, a sharp chill swept through his chest. He brushed it off as a breeze, but within minutes, a deeper ache took hold. He tried to stand and reach for the doorknob, but his legs buckled. The pad of paper slipped from his hands. His breath caught. Not like before. This was different, deeper, scarier. Lily had been in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of orange juice, when she heard the thud outside. She rushed to the porch and found Clay collapsed on the steps, gasping for air, his lips pale and skin cold to the touch. She dropped the glass. It shattered, but she didn't even flinch. "Grandpa!" she cried, kneeling beside him. "Grandpa, stay with me, please." She checked his pulse. Weak, thready. His chest rattled with each breath. Training kicked in. She grabbed her phone, called 911, and began warming his chest with a blanket while keeping his head elevated. The ambulance came quickly. The paramedics recognized her from the local hospital. She rattled off his vitals, symptoms, and recent changes in health as they loaded him onto the stretcher. They nodded in quiet admiration. Her hands were trembling, but her voice stayed steady until the doors closed. Then her shoulders slumped, and she whispered again, "Please, Grandpa, don't leave me now." Keanu was on set when the call came. His assistant's face went pale just hearing Lily's voice on the other end. Keanu didn't hesitate. He left everything behind. Within an hour, he was at the hospital, standing beside Lily in the ICU waiting room, hand on her back, letting her cry into his chest. The diagnosis was pneumonia. A serious case. At his age, the doctor said, it could turn either way. The next 72 hours were critical. Clay drifted in and out of consciousness. He didn't speak much. Tubes ran from his arms, his nose, the beeping of monitors forming a cruel soundtrack. But every time he opened his eyes, Lily was there, sitting beside the bed, holding his hand, whispering stories from their recent work. She brought a photo of the first winter grip prototype and set it on the tray table. "We're almost ready to go to market," she said, brushing a damp cloth across his forehead. "The cane, Grandpa, your cane." She didn't sleep. For 3 nights, she sat in that chair, legs pulled up, eyes fixed on the monitor lines. Nurses offered blankets, snacks, even gentle encouragement to rest. She refused. She said he waited his whole life to be seen, to be respected, and she wasn't about to disappear when he needed her most. Keanu pulled every string he had. He called in specialists from across the state. The best pulmonologist in Texas flew in that night. An entire team began monitoring Clay's oxygen levels around the clock. By the 4th morning, something shifted. Clay's oxygen levels began to stabilize. His breathing, though still shallow, had a rhythm. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. They reduced the sedation slightly, and by early afternoon, his eyes opened fully for the first time in days. The first thing he saw was Lily, asleep in the chair next to him. Her head tilted against the wall, arms crossed tightly across her chest. The first thing he said, barely more than a whisper, was her name. Lily. Her eyes opened immediately. She was at his side in seconds, gripping his hand, like a lifeline. "You scared me," she said, tears forming as she smiled through them. "You scared me so bad, Grandpa." Clay blinked slowly, registering her words, her face, her hand holding his. "I'm still here," he murmured. "You stayed. I never left." That afternoon, Keanu entered the room with a small package in his hands. He waited for Clay to give a nod, a weak but deliberate gesture that he was up for company. Keanu smiled, then stepped closer. "I have something for you," he said, setting the package gently on Clay's lap. "Thought you might like to see it first." Clay unwrapped the paper slowly, his fingers trembling. Inside was a sleek, matte black cane, curved at the top, with soft grip ridges and an ergonomic base. Etched near the handle was a small inscription. "Prototype has shown Clay." He held it like it was made of gold. "It's beautiful," Clay said, his voice cracking. "It doesn't even look like a medical device." "It's not," Lily whispered, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It's a statement. It's dignity. It's yours." The prototype was the culmination of weeks of work. Lily's feedback had been critical. She had suggested slight grip variations for arthritic hands, a wider base for balance in slippery conditions, and the kind of color options that would remove the stigma of using a cane. The engineers had embraced her suggestions. Clay had inspired the design, but Lily had humanized it. Clay's hands wrapped around the cane handle, and for a long moment, he just stared at it. Then he looked at Keanu, then at Lily. "I thought my story was over," he said quietly. "But maybe it was just a long intermission." Lily leaned in close, resting her head against his arm. "You're not done, Grandpa. We've got so much more to do, and people to help." In the days that followed, Clay began to recover faster than the doctors predicted. They called it the power of purpose. Each time a nurse came into the room, he'd point to the cane beside him and say, "We made that. Me and my granddaughter. We're just getting started." And each time he said the word granddaughter, he said it with a pride that had once been buried under years of silence, grief, and regret, but now stood tall beside him. The day the doors opened, the Texas sun broke through a veil of soft morning clouds, casting golden light across the newly painted facade of the Winters Veterans Home. The former motel, once forgotten and weather-worn, had been transformed into something almost sacred. Fresh stucco, wide windows, wheelchair-accessible ramps, rooftop solar panels, and an American flag fluttering high above the central courtyard. Clay stood in the entryway, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt Lily had ironed for him that morning. His new winter grip cane rested against the inside of his knee as he leaned slightly forward, watching the first veterans arrive. Most came with nothing but backpacks. Some carried duffel bags or even shopping carts filled with what little they owned. Their faces were weathered, their steps unsure. A few had service dogs. One man wore a faded Army Ranger jacket. Another had tattoos from Vietnam running down both forearms. They all looked tired, suspicious. But when they stepped across the threshold, something in their eyes shifted. The smell of freshly cooked chili filled the air. Lily had coordinated the meal, enlisting local volunteers to serve home-style food in the common kitchen. Tables were set. Welcome kits were laid out on beds, each with clean towels, a toiletry bag, socks, and a card that simply read, "You belong here." Clay greeted each one, offering his hand. Some shook it. Some just nodded. A few asked, "You live here too?" And Clay would smile and say, "I was the first one through the door." They seemed to respect that. By noon, the building buzzed with the quiet rhythm of new beginnings. Men and women who hadn't slept in beds in years were lying back on firm mattresses, testing the pillows, pulling curtains aside to see the view. One older Marine found the rooftop garden and just stood there for a while, staring at the rows of newly planted herbs. Another wandered into the woodworking room and gently touched the surface of a pine bench, as if remembering how to use his hands. Keanu stood to the side, letting it all unfold. He didn't want the attention. But every so often, a veteran would walk up to him and say, "Thanks," or "I saw what you did on the news. This place, it means a lot." He'd nod, shake their hands, and quietly step back. Inside the common room, Clay spotted a young veteran, maybe 30, maybe less, sitting in a corner by himself, back straight, eyes hard. The man had a prosthetic leg and wore a hoodie with the hood up. Clay walked over, slow and steady, and sat beside him without saying a word. Minutes passed in silence. Then Clay spoke. I used to sit like that too, back when I thought nobody could understand." The young man turned slightly, but didn't respond. "They told me I was too old to be useful, that I was lucky just to be breathing." Another beat of silence. "But then someone believed in me," Clay added. "Someone saw past the rust, gave me a reason to get up every day." The man didn't look at him, but his jaw tightened. "I'm not here to fix you," Clay said. "I'm just here to tell you. This place is yours now too. However long you need it, however much or little you want to say." The man finally glanced at him, eyes raw and cautious. "What's your name?" "Clay." "Name's Rivera," the man said. And for the first time in months, maybe years, he let his shoulders drop. Later that afternoon, a group of veterans gathered around the courtyard's old flagpole, now restored and shining. Someone had found a bugle and played a rough but heartfelt version of taps. No one said much. They didn't need to. For many of them, it was the first time they had stood shoulder to shoulder with other soldiers in decades, not in combat, not in uniform, but in solidarity. Clay stood at the edge of the group, his cane planted in the grass, his chest rising slowly with emotion. Lily came to his side, gently slipping her arm through his. She had tears in her eyes, but kept them silent, knowing this was his moment. Not for show, not for recognition, but something deeper, a return. Inside the community center, activities had begun. One of the veterans, a former Navy cook, took over the kitchen and started prepping meatloaf. Another had already signed up to teach a weekly workshop in basic carpentry. A bulletin board quickly filled with notes, requests for AA meetings, PTSD support circles, gardening volunteers, and Sunday morning coffee clubs. The Winters Veterans Home had become more than shelter. It was beginning to breathe as a living place of healing. That evening, as twilight rolled in, Clay was asked to say a few words at a quiet welcome gathering. A folding chair had been set out in the courtyard, but he chose to remain standing. "I thought I was at the end of the road," he began, voice slow but steady. "Thought all that was left for me was silence and dust. But someone knocked on my door, not with pity, but with purpose." He glanced toward Keanu, who gave the smallest of nods from where he stood in the back. "I didn't think I mattered anymore," Clay continued. "Didn't think anyone would remember what we gave. But looking around now, I see proof that none of us were forgotten. Not really. There were no loud cheers, no applause, just silence. The kind that says people are holding their breath because something sacred has been spoken." Afterward, as the veterans trickled back inside or lingered under the string lights hung across the courtyard, a tall black man with silver hair and a slight limp approached Clay. His uniform jacket was spotless, even after all these years. The man stopped directly in front of him, eyes locked. Then he raised his hand in a slow, respectful salute. Clay hesitated, stunned. The man's voice was low. "Welcome home, soldier." Clay's throat tightened. He returned the salute with trembling fingers. "No." Words came. None were needed. Later that night, long after most had gone to sleep, Clay sat out on the rooftop garden with Lily. The city lights stretched beyond them, but the night felt quiet, like it was cradling them in gratitude. "You did this," Lily whispered. "You gave them more than a home." "No," Clay said softly. "They gave it to each other. I just finally found my place." She laid her head on his shoulder, and for the first time in decades, Clay Winter felt truly at peace. The renovations were complete. Winter's Veterans Home had become more than a sanctuary. It was a symbol. Yet even as Clay settled into this new rhythm, Keanu couldn't shake a quiet question lingering in the back of his mind. It had started with a comment. One night, Clay had mentioned his service during World War II, casually referring to his time on Okinawa. Keanu had paused when he heard it. His own grandfather, whom he barely remembered, had also fought in Okinawa. That battle had haunted the family's stories for generations. His mother used to whisper about the horrors her father endured and the miracle that had brought him home alive. Keanu never thought much about it until that night, so he decided to dig deeper. He contacted a military historian friend in Los Angeles and passed along Clay's full name, service number, and unit. Within days, old personnel records, medical field logs, and archived deployment orders were scanned and emailed over. Keanu sat at the design lab late at night, scrolling through brittle digital documents. One page made his heart stop. It was dated the 13th of May, 1945, a medic's field report from the 96th Infantry Division. A Private Clayton Winter had carried out 3 injured soldiers from an open ridge while under fire. One of them was listed as Private First Class Martin W. Taylor. Taylor was Keanu's grandfather. Keanu leaned back in his chair, stunned. His breath caught in his throat. The same man who had once collapsed in the Complairant, middle of a broken house on the edge of town, abandoned and forgotten, had saved his family 70 years earlier. This wasn't just kindness coming full circle, it was legacy. The next morning, Keanu drove across the city with something wrapped carefully in a soft velvet cloth. He picked up his mother, Patricia, who now lived in a quiet home in Santa Monica. Her hair had turned silver, and she walked with a cane, but her memory was sharp as ever. As they drove, Keanu explained everything: the veteran, the abandoned house, the winter grip cane, the letters, the hospital stay, and then Okinawa. Patricia sat in silence as the car moved through the downtown streets. When they arrived at Winter's veterans' home, Clay was sitting under the awning in his usual spot, watching a chess game unfold between 2 younger vets. He looked up and smiled when he saw Keanu. Then his eyes shifted to the woman beside him. Keanu stepped forward, offering a quiet nod. "Clay, this is my mom, Patricia." Clay rose slowly, steadying himself on his cane. Patricia didn't say a word at first. She simply looked at him, her eyes glassy. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a small leather pouch. From it, she drew a tarnished silver medallion, the kind soldiers used to carry for luck. It was dented, worn, and still bore the faint etching of a cross. "This was my father's," she said softly. "He wore it every day until the day he died. He said a medic pulled him from the mud in Okinawa. He never forgot the man's face." Clay stared at it. Then, slowly, recognition bloomed behind his eyes. "I remember him," he whispered. "Shrapnel in his leg. He kept reaching for this medallion even while we were under fire." Clay held the medallion in his weathered hands, gently turning it between his fingers as if it were a fragile piece of time itself. The worn metal shimmered slightly in the morning light, and for a moment, everything around them chattered. Wind, the city's quiet hum faded into stillness. "I was just a kid back then," Clay murmured. "Barely 20, scared, skinny, and stubborn." "But your father? He kept trying to crawl back into the fight, even with his leg torn up. I had to hold him down while patching him up. I told him, 'You'll fight another day, but not today.'" He laughed, even through the pain. Patricia wiped her eyes and nodded. "He always said that line, word for word. We thought he made it up." Clay smiled faintly. "No, it was a moment shared between soldiers. I didn't know what became of him after that." Keanu stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on Clay's shoulder. "He lived. He went home, married, raised my mom, and told that story every Thanksgiving until the day he died. That one act, it changed everything. I wouldn't be here without you, Clay." Clay lowered his gaze, visibly moved. His voice cracked. "All these years, I thought my best days were buried on that island. I never knew they meant anything beyond survival." Patricia reached out and placed the medallion in his palm. "He would have wanted you to have this. He said it protected him, but I think it was you." Clay closed his hand around the medallion. "Thank you," he whispered. "I never imagined this would come back to me." Keanu sat down beside him, the weight of the moment settling into his chest. You saved my grandfather. And decades later, I find you in a house falling apart, alone. If that's not something divine, I don't know what island." They sat together, not saying much more. Just breathing. Just understanding. The sky overhead was cloudless and calm, like it, too, had paused for the reunion. Later that day, Keanu gathered everyone inside the community hall of the veterans' home. The walls were newly painted, the space decorated with hand-carved wood plaques and small flags above the fireplace. Dozens of veterans, young and old, sat in folding chairs. Lily stood near the doorway, her eyes scanning the room for her grandfather, pride shining in her expression. Keanu took the stage. "There are moments in life," he began, "where the threads of history pull tight, where the past and present collide, not by accident, but by quiet design." He glanced at Clay, who sat in the front row holding the silver medallion. "This man saved my grandfather in Okinawa, and 78 years later that same legacy saved me, saved us all. There wasn't a dry eye in the room." A veteran in the back rose slowly and saluted. Another followed. Then another. One by one, they stood. Not just for Clay's past, but for the future he'd helped create. The Winter Grip product line officially launched on a bright Monday morning. A simple press release had gone out across industry channels, supported by a quiet interview Keanu had given to a well-known podcast about innovation and purpose. But what happened next exceeded anything they'd expected. Within 48 hours, every hospital supply distributor in the country placed orders. Doctors and nurses shared the designs across forums. Caregivers posted videos of patients holding pill bottles they could finally open on their own. Physical therapists requested canes, forks, spoons, and grips that made recovery easier for stroke survivors. Orders poured in from clinics, rehab centers, nursing homes, and even military bases. Keanu watched from the sidelines, refusing to take credit. "It's Clay's mind and Lily's heart that made this real," he told every reporter. "I just listened and got out of the way." Clay, on the other hand, sat in quiet awe at the old desk they'd set up for him in the workshop. When the news came through about the first 1,000,000 units shipped, he didn't say anything at first. He just stared at the prototype cane beside him, the one he still used, and ran his hand across the initials engraved at the base. WG, One Life, Many Hands. When Lily came in, her hair pulled back from a clinical rotation at the VA hospital, she smiled. "You should be proud, Grandpa. They're using your cane in Pittsburgh now. 100 veterans in one center alone." He smiled gently. "It's not the cane I'm proud of, Lily. It's you." She shook her head and laughed softly. "I just gave a few ideas. You did the rest." He pointed to the work table. "And whose idea was it to change the angle of the grip for patients with arthritis, or to suggest that we add texture for those with tremors? That wasn't mine. That was the nurse in the family." Lily looked around the room, suddenly seeing it not as a dusty workshop, but as a place of transformation. The metal tools, the sketches pinned to the walls, the wooden handles soaking in oil, they were all pieces of something larger now, something permanent. 2 weeks later, Lily officially transferred her credits and enrolled in a nursing program in San Antonio. She moved into the spare room at Clay's, bringing with her textbooks, stethoscopes, a coffee pot she swore was better than his, and more energy than the old house had seen in decades. They fell into a quiet rhythm. Mornings began early with coffee and the sound of birds outside the screen door. Lily headed to class or her hospital shift. Clay tinkered at the workbench. Afternoons brought trials of new designs, with Lily helping him evaluate how elderly patients might react to certain angles, weights, or textures. Evenings were for soup and bread, sometimes shared in silence, other times filled with laughter over stories Lily had never heard about her father. One night, after a long day of testing utensils for patients with limited grip, Clay sat at the dining table, a pen in his hand and a stack of yellowed papers beside him. His old letter, the one he'd started for Thomas decades ago but never finished. He read through the fading ink, then turned to a fresh page. The paper trembled slightly under Clay's hand, not from age, but from the weight of time. He adjusted his glasses and looked out the window, where Lily was on the porch with her notes, humming something soft. The same way Thomas used to hum when he was nervous. Clay dipped the pen and began again. "Dear Thomas," he wrote. His hand slow but steady. "I know I've written and rewritten this letter 1,000 times, but none of those drafts ever made it to you. I suppose I thought there'd be more time, more chances. I was wrong." He paused, collecting his thoughts, then continued. "I've made more mistakes than I can count. I missed your birthdays. I missed your first steps, your graduation, your wedding. I wasn't there when you needed a father. I thought discipline and distance would make you strong. But I see now that what you really needed was love and presence. And you gave me a granddaughter who shines with all the best parts of you. She's brave, smart, kind. She looks out for people the way I should have looked out for you. She's made me better. She's teaching me every day how to stay soft without falling apart." Clay looked down at the signature line. For the first time in his life, he didn't hesitate. "Love, Dad." He folded the letter carefully and placed it in the envelope he had kept for over 30 years. This time, he didn't seal it. He simply left it on the table, where Lily would see it in the morning. The next day, Lily found it just after breakfast. She didn't say anything, but her eyes welled up. She touched the envelope like it was made of porcelain, then leaned in and hugged Clay from behind as he stood at the sink. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. Later that week, Keanu returned to town for a brief visit. His presence was quieter now, less like a celebrity, and more like a long-lost cousin dropping by. He brought with him the first commercial box of Winter Grip products, now packaged in eco-friendly cardboard with soft tones and the tagline Lily had coined herself, "Made for every hand." Inside the box, one tool had been set aside. A limited edition cane, polished to a shine, with the number 0001 engraved at the base and the initials CJ below it. Clay Johnson took it in his hands and blinked hard against the sudden emotion in his chest. "You helped build something real," Keanu said. "Something that matters." Clay gave a quiet nod. "And it only happened because someone believed a broken old man wasn't finished yet." "No," Keanu replied. "You weren't broken. You were waiting for the right moment to begin again." Lily reached over and took both their hands. "This is just the beginning." The late afternoon sun spilled across the courtyard of Winter's Veterans Home, casting golden light over the freshly painted wooden benches, blooming planters, and quiet shuffle of cards being played at one of the picnic tables. Clay sat with his arm around Lily, who had just gotten off her hospital shift. Her scrubs were wrinkled, her hair tied back loosely, but her face glowed with peace. She leaned her head gently against his shoulder. Across the courtyard, Keanu was deep in conversation with one of the residents, a double amputee named Marcus, who had started a woodworking club in the basement. The two men shared a laugh, and Marcus held up a small toy truck he'd carved from scrap cedar. Keanu gave him a thumbs up and pointed to one of the younger veterans joining in. These weren't just men healing. They were living. One of the residents walked by with a tray of lemonade, offering it to Clay and Lily. They took 2 glasses and thanked him. As he walked away, Clay watched his steady gait, the slight limp supported by a Winter Grip cane, a product born from necessity, refined by compassion, and distributed with purpose. "Hard to believe," Clay whispered. "This was all just sketches in a shoebox once." Lily smiled. "And now, it's hope, with a handle." They sat in silence for a while, watching Keanu move from group to group with the same ease he once reserved for movie sets and premieres. He wasn't a guest here anymore. He was family. Behind them, the doors to the facility opened and 2 children ran out laughing. Their mother, one of the volunteer nurses, chased after them, calling their names. The kids paused when they saw Clay and waved. "Hi, Grandpa Clay." Clay blinked, his throat tightening. He waved back with a soft grin. "Hey, troublemakers." Lily leaned in and whispered, "They've decided you're everyone's grandpa now." "I guess I'm okay with that," he said, his voice catching a little. Dinner that evening was simple: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, fresh green beans from the rooftop garden. Everyone gathered in the dining hall, laughter and clinking silverware filling the room. Clay gave up his walker for the evening and used the polished cane instead, the engraved one, his one-of-a-kind. As the meal ended, someone called for a toast. Marcus stood and raised his glass. To the man who didn't give up, who taught us you can build again, even from the ashes. Clay, you gave us more than tools. You gave us belonging. The room erupted in applause. Clay just bowed his head. Later, as the stars blanketed the sky and the courtyard emptied, Clay and Lily walked slowly, side by side. Keanu joined them, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. The breeze was gentle, and the silence between them was full of meaning. As they reached the edge of the garden path, Clay looked up at the moon, and then over at Lily and Keanu. His voice was barely above a whisper. "We did all right, didn't we?" Lily nodded. Keanu smiled. "You did more than all right," Keanu said. "You came full circle." The next morning, Clay sat at the edge of his bed, pulling on his socks slowly. The light crept in through the curtains in soft streaks. Lily had already left for class, but she'd left a note on his nightstand in her gentle handwriting. "See you for lunch, Grandpa. Proud of you. Love, Lily." He folded it and slipped it into the pocket of his flannel shirt. Then he turned to the small wooden desk in the corner of the room. His journal lay open to a blank page. After a moment of hesitation, he picked up his pen and wrote a few final lines beneath the last entry, the one he'd addressed to Thomas months ago but never signed. Today, he wrote just 5 words: "Love, Dad." He closed the journal, placed it on the windowsill, and exhaled deeply. His hands no longer trembled. He no longer felt the pressure of unfinished business. In its place was a quiet peace, a sense of purpose, fulfilled not through medals or money, but through moments, through people. Downstairs, a small group of veterans were planting herbs along the path leading to the entrance. Laughter floated up to his window. A few of them looked younger, men who'd just moved in, and a few looked older, stooped shoulders, but eyes that sparkled with new beginnings. Among them stood Keanu, holding a shovel, chatting like one of them. Clay smiled. This wasn't just a building anymore. It was a home. In the weeks that followed, news of the Winter Grip project spread. Hospitals in all 50 states placed bulk orders. Physical therapy clinics began requesting consultations with Lily and Clay. New designs were already in development: forks with better grip for arthritis patients, specialized spoons for veterans with limited motor skills, even gardening tools. But none of that compared to what was happening inside the home itself. Friendships formed around old kitchen tables. Holidays were celebrated with handmade decorations and music from Bluetooth speakers. Painful memories gave way to hopeful futures. And Clay, once a forgotten man living in a condemned building, had become the soul of something greater. His cane, marked Prototype Hashone, now leaned proudly against the wall beside his recliner. One afternoon, Keanu returned from a speaking engagement in New York. Instead of Hollywood press, he'd spoken about the power of restoring dignity, about Clay, about Lily, about the importance of building not just tools, but trust and places where people feel seen. At the end of his talk, Keanu said something that echoed across the internet. One act of kindness can ripple through generations. One wrong turn doesn't have to define your path. Sometimes it's in picking someone up that we find where we belong. The clip went viral. But in San Antonio, in that small community garden, Clay watched the video on a donated tablet and said nothing. He just smiled. That evening, as the stars blinked back into the sky, Lily returned from school and joined him on the bench. "Did you ever think it'd turn out like this?" she asked. He shook his head. "Never, but I'm glad I lived long enough to see it." They sat quietly as the sun set behind them. A group of young veterans played chess nearby. Someone had put on soft jazz from the community radio. The world, just for a moment, felt still. So now, we ask you, yes, you, watching right now, where are you watching this incredible story from? And, more importantly, Who in your life taught you the meaning of resilience and kindness? Tell us in the comments. Let their name live on. Because stories like this, they begin with one step. And you never know whose life that step will change.